You are now live and you can start. Ladies, you're free to begin the session.
Hello. Will Carolina also join the session?
No, I don't believe she is joining us.
Okay, so let's go ahead and start. So welcome everyone. I hope that you're having a wonderful time, that you are enjoying all the great content from this day. And today we're going to talk about sustainability regulations and their impact on entrepreneurship in Latin America. My name is Paola Fonseca. I represent an organization of lawyers called GALE, Global Alliance of Impact Lawyers. And what we try to communicate is how regulation can be used as a tool, as an opportunity in order to enable impact to occur. And regulation has currently been at the forefront on how the how sustainability related matters regarding procurement, and also regarding how public procurement, and how private organizations can just purchase across their value chain. And the idea for today was to have a very nice conversation with Cecilia and Maria Camila, which I will allow them to introduce themselves right away. And we will hear from two different points of view, because Maria Camila, she works as a sustainability director at Juan Valdez. She will share more on what that is, and how Juan Valdez is enabling across the value chain sustainability standards, and what are the challenges around it. And then Cecilia, who has been in the ecosystem for so long, it's really an honor to join any panel with her. You will see that she has quite important insights that come from experience and from everything that Agora Partnership does. She will then share on what some of the challenges when you're talking about entrepreneurs. So perhaps Maria Camila, you can introduce yourself, and then Cecilia, and then we can go ahead and start.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Paola. Thank you, Cecilia, for having us here. It's a really, really huge pleasure to be in this wonderful event. I know we are going to be for 24 hours, so it's great to be part of this agenda. As Paola mentioned, I'm Maria Camila Lopez. I'm the Sustainability Director for Juan Valdez. Juan Valdez is actually the brand for our company, Procafecol. Procafecol is a Colombian-based company, Colombian coffee-based company. We were created in 2002 to generate value to the Colombian coffee growers at the last stage of the value chain by trading Colombian coffee. We are owned by the National Federation of Coffee Growers, which is basically a non-for-profit organization which groups more than 5,400 coffee growing families. And I think with this, I'm just moving into Cecilia's stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having us at the Sustainable Procurement Pledge event. And also, of course, thank you to Paola and Maria Camila. All three of us have been working together for quite some time. So we also know a bit of the sort of share a lot of the same sort of challenges and opportunities in this space, but you'll be hearing from kind of different perspectives or different angles of how we're tackling the sustainability and readiness of enterprises for the new associated regulations. But just for a brief introduction, my name is Cecilia Foxworthy. I'm the CEO of Agora Partnerships, which is a nonprofit organization, entrepreneurial support organization that works in all Spanish-speaking Latin America, and particularly in Mexico, Central America, and Colombia. And we work directly with both social impact enterprises or enterprises that are built on a mission or purpose. And we also work with traditional small and growing businesses led by women. And we have sustainability readiness initiatives in both of those different, for both of those different respective audiences. And I'll be talking a little bit about sort of the challenges and what other entrepreneurial support organizations can do to better support enterprises that are based in Latin America to be social procurement ready. And with that, I think I'm passing it back to Paula.
Yes, so we wanted to first just share on these regulations, and then try to listen how private organizations like Juan Valdez are dealing with this, and how organizations like Agora are supporting on them. So I always have this joke. I always try to share it. I think it summarizes very well on how sometimes regulations are viewed, and it is that legal is not sexy, but you cannot be sexy without legal. Okay, so if there's a regulatory barrier, or if there's already a black and white standard that's telling you how you should do something, you should comply with it. Otherwise, regulators come in, penalties show up, and many other challenges. Okay. For a long time, there was no clear departure point on how measuring sustainability related standards across the value chain were being dealt. And governments started doing something around it for many reasons, right? Litigations started coming along. And also there was a lot of greenwashing, whitewashing, rainbow washing, right? On organizations not disclosing properly. This entailed many social challenges and environmental challenges and governance challenges. We started then seeing how there were regulations like FCPA from the United States trying to avoid on corruption, and there were some other disclosures that were required from the financial sector on how they were allocating capital. We saw a rekindling on revisions regarding human rights, but there was no comprehensive understanding on how sustainability was going to be reported. And then this new word came along, ESG. ISAH, environmental social governance, and it brought to light the fact that it was not only governance as a silo, or environmental as a silo, or social as a silo, that actually all of them were intertwined. And the European Union decided to step forward, and they for a long time, more than a decade now, they have been given steps towards trying to make sure that sustainability gets reported. They started with the financial sector. They also started regulating on public procurement. They started regulating on several different areas. And then eventually they got to private companies. And this is where Latin America became a major player for really on the worldwide stage, because we are a commodities powerhouse. So there are a lot of agricultural products that are that come from produced in Latin America that are exported to the European Union or the United States or Asia, and even water or lithium or oil and gas. There's many of these commodities. Also, there was a huge surge on nearshoring, when companies from the global north outsource certain services to the global south. And being that Latin America is in a similar time zone, rather than, let's say, for example, India or Pakistan or some of the others, then a lot of services were also being exported to those jurisdictions. So there were presented, by this challenge of the European Union and the United States. Now the United States has changed sort of like a guiding north star on how they view on these sustainability matters, but that was not the case always. And all of them started issuing these regulations, which got integrated at some point with how due diligence was going to be catered across the value chain. And that's the reason why, when we decided to name this panel Sustainability Regulations and Their Impact on Entrepreneurship in LATAM, got together. So the European Union, like I was sharing, decided to move forward and sort of like set it on black and white. And they came up with the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, which basically was, or I like to call it like the claws, right, and the and the legs and the hands, or so on, of all of these huge bag, this bucket of regulations in the European Union. And in a nutshell, what this regulation asks is that certain companies, right, not all companies, but companies that purchase or produce goods or services across their value chain should make sure that certain sustainability standards are being complied. Now, that is sort of like the push. Then Asia is also trying to keep up with other regulations regarding that standard. And then we have countries in Latin America, like, for example, Brazil or Colombia, that have moved forward and embraced these type of sustainability standards through different methods, right? They have done it through the IFRS, which is the accounting guidelines in which almost all accounting gets reported worldwide. And then they issued guidelines on sustainability 1 and sustainability 2. And then governments in the region started asking all of these organizations to disclose on this. And so more steps were being put forward regarding regulation. And that's where I'm going to stop, because that's the idea that you need to get. So now we have a bucket of black and white guidelines set by governments, set by well-known organizations that are telling companies like Juan Valdez, and that are telling social entrepreneurs, which out of which Agora supports and helps and delivers programs to comply with this. Now, that's great, but that's black and white. When we listen to what Maria and Cecilia are going to share, that's actually what's happening on the ground. Okay, how are these organizations dealing with the fact that they don't have data? They perhaps want to report, but they don't have the data, or they have the data but don't have the proper training, and overall the really burden of the costs of all of this. And that's the richness of this conversation that we want to put forward today. So policymakers did something, lawyers know where that stands, but the context is the one that actually delivers. So taking that into account, we had agreed, because we did prepare in advance for this conversation, that Maria Camila was going to share on how organizations like Juan Valdez are actually moving forward and trying to support their value chain, and they're embracing this role as an enabler, and she will share a little bit more on that. And then Maria Camila, afterwards, you can pass on the word to Ceci, so she can share on the challenges for social entrepreneurs.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Paola. It was a very insightful context about the regulation and how we are being all affected by that. I want to start to explain you about our business. We are basically a Colombian coffee chain. And what we have been doing since 2002, we have presence with coffee shops in 20 countries, in Asia, Middle East, Europe, basically Spain, and Latin America mostly. Obviously, Colombia still is our biggest presence, where we have our biggest presence, but we are still like in a very important expansion process. So it's a business that is growing, and I will say with all humbleness that we are a Colombian brand. You know, like there is like a patriotism, a love about our brand in our country, because we are taking the Colombian coffee to the entire world, and it's certainly an icon of our culture. So saying this, I want to highlight that we have our coffee growers actually are small coffee producers. They are no bigger than 5 hectares. Most of them have no more than 5 hectares, 96% to be precise. So when we are talking about working with our value chain, we are talking about working with a vulnerable value chain, and we definitely need to approach in that way, as we acknowledge that the only way of moving forward and conquering markets is by engaging them in new perspectives and new dynamics that the global north is requiring, such as those that you were mentioning in terms of regulation. What we have been seeing so far is that we have been facing an increasing demand on regulation in terms of social and environmental terms. I will say that Colombia is a very advanced country in terms of regulation. Latin America, with Chile, probably is one of the most advanced countries in terms of regulation, with environmental aspects, with social aspects as well, labor. So this has been an advantage for us because we have been able to engage into these initiatives with a very innovative approach, where we have been trying to create these win-win situations with our suppliers, considering that they are, as I previously say, small and medium coffee producers, and they are required to be accompanied and lead by us in order to accomplish with the requirements. I'm going to go backwards and explain a little bit how we operate, because it's very important in order to show you what we are doing and why this is so important. This topic is so important for us. We are owned by the National Federation of Coffee Growers, as I mentioned, which means that we are owned by a non-for-profit organization. And saying this, what we do as a big organization with the National Federation of Coffee Growers is looking after the needs and the communities, coffee communities, the needs of these coffee communities. So what we have been doing so far is trying to make that these communities can compete in a competitive international market, coffee market, and also provide them with tools like financial, human, different kind of tools in order to make them competitive in a global interest. What we do as Juan Valdez is exactly to trading, commercialize this Colombian coffee, premium Colombian coffee, with our coffee shops. We have more than 600 coffee shops around the globe. And it's very interesting because what we have been seeing is how through the past of the time, we have been facing different regulations and different political views in the different countries where we have been present. Basically, recently, as we all know, Europe has turned into a very strict mandate in terms of social, environmental, and governance aspects. And we have been working, I'm going to explain later on about this in another question that we are going to abort. But basically, we have been working in how to cope and how to respond to these dynamics. But it's very interesting that since we were created, we set this inclusive business model where we were looking to, by buying their coffee, the coffee producers' coffee, we are also generating value with an extra price, with fair prices first of all. Secondly, with extra prices related with special programs, impactful programs, and also by generating triple value initiatives, like where we can support communities in social and environmental aspects. So we have been creating this shared value platform in order to deliver these initiatives to the communities. And in order to do so, we have been making sure that the customers are also engaged into these initiatives by having a product that is differentiated, that they can trace and understand where is they coming from. And in this sense, we can also obviously translate the value to the consumers, but also to be able to pay a little bit more for the product to the communities. So it's a win-win situation where we have been trying to build a path with these communities. And by doing so, we have been able also to increment the capacities of these communities to face that regulation. So that will be the first point for us in order to face what we have been seeing in recent times, especially with Europe, with EUDR, with CSDDD, with human rights related regulation, with plastic regulation, and all related like requirements that are coming, because otherwise it will be very difficult for these small and medium coffee producers to accomplish this kind of initiatives. So what we have been doing is to work with them hand to hand and to create these initiatives that can first assess the point where we are at with them, where they are, what they need, where are their gaps, and secondly, to be able to work with them hand in hand, understanding and creating initiatives to close the gap and to find ways of approaching to these challenges in order to make them competitive for the international market. By doing so, we have been able to not just being in that market, but turn into a competitive advantage those social and environmental added value initiatives that we have. And I will say that that's the way that Juan Valdez as a brand is approaching to this reality. However, obviously, we are in need of an ecosystem that goes beyond us, beyond our own work. And we definitely need to make sure that we are working hand in hand with governments, with local authorities, with also not-for-profit organizations, with cooperation, international cooperation, and even with competitors for making sure that we can take these necessities and these communities into a next level and taking them into a competitive sphere, because otherwise it's going to be impossible to accomplish what is being required. And I just want to close with the immense, the huge challenge that is posing the geopolitical situation that we are living right now, because we have on one side some countries that are demanding very high standards in social and environmental terms, and on the other side we are seeing like some detractors on these agendas. So it's very challenging times in order to how to balance these thoroughly different realities, and coping with this with our supply chain and making sure that they can navigate and have some sort of like stable scenario for competing. So I think it's a recent challenge that we are seeing as a world, in a very interconnected world where we are all part of the same economic system, and that's what we have been trying to do, and how to blind them at some extent, and making sure that they are not going to be affected by all these like weights of different like clashes that we are seeing in the world in terms of regulation or in terms of market conditions. Ceci, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad you mentioned the current geopolitical situation, because that obviously is affecting in a very big way entrepreneur support organizations and social enterprises, small and growing businesses across Latin America, and of course across the world as well. And I will say that yes, there are some major detractors. And however, and this will affect their detraction will affect us all financially. However, we are also seeing other newer players stepping in. So it remains to be seen if all of the holes will be plugged from what's left of the detractors. But that is something to watch. I will say, and Paola knows how much I respect lawyers. We depend very heavily on our lawyers for a lot of what we do in all of the different countries that we operate in. And regulation is absolutely key. I will, however, say, and probably everybody has heard this before, we need to be as support organizations and as enterprises ourselves, need to be implementing these social and environmental changes or positivity, if you can say it that way, because it makes good business sense, not just because somebody else is telling us that we have to do this. At the end of the day, the detractors are going to detract. The geopolitical situation is going to keep changing. We need to do what is best for our business, in our community, in our nation, wherever we might be operating. And that means paying attention to your environmental impact, paying attention to how you treat your workers, paying attention to how you treat your clients. That has always actually been the case. And it's actually sort of unfortunate that we have to put so much regulation because people don't seem to realize that this just does make actual good business sense for longevity, for resilience, and also for success. I will say, however, that there are a lot of things that enterprises or support organizations don't even think about. And this is not related to recent regulations, but I do remember many years ago when I was wearing another hat, I was working with artisan groups across the world in that case. And there was new regulation that came through that said children's toys can't have any strings longer than 6 inches. Okay, great. Because 6 inches, more than 6 inches, posed a choking hazard. So apparently kids were using accidentally longer strings, and they were getting hurt from them. So okay, that makes sense. Make things shorter. But the chaos that came from just that one tiny little regulation, all of the 200 groups that we were working with had to go back to their inventory, had to adjust all of their inventory, had to redo their quality standards, had to redo their actual product designs. It created mass chaos. And so eventually the regulators realized that, oh, we can't just drop this in here and then expect everybody to comply overnight. I think that there is still a lot of room for regulators to realize how the regulations do, in fact, trickle down the value chain, and give enough time and resources for enterprises to be able to comply. In some cases that does happen, and in some cases it doesn't. But it is part of the responsibility of the entrepreneur support organizations. And I'm not saying that we do this extremely well either. Like, we have room for improvement too. But it is part of the responsibility as a support organizations to help the enterprises figure out how they can adjust to best comply with those regulations. And again, to best make their business models resilient in the face of environmental and social challenges and changes. One of the things that I will also say is that we not only work directly with enterprises, but we also work with corporations that source or could potentially source from the smaller enterprises that we work with. And one of the realities, Juan Valdez is different in this situation, but one of the realities is that a lot of corporations have no idea who their tier 2, 3, 4, 5 suppliers are. They have no idea. So as a social enterprise or as an enterprise support organization, it does behoove you to say, hey, I'm doing this well. Here is my data. I am a provider or I am a supplier that you should be working with even more because I already comply. So it is in your interest to share what you're doing to be more environmentally and socially positive with all of your buyers, because then that buyer can share with their buyers, who can then share with their buyers. It's a whole big chain. And unless you're sharing the information and the data, they probably just are not going to know, A, that you exist, and then B, if they know you exist, they won't have any idea if you are making changes or already in compliance. And that can help them. as well when they have to comply with their larger buyers as well. The fact of the matter is most small enterprises cannot sell directly to corporations. Their quality standards are too high, their volumes are too high, their terms are horrible often, or they're just not ready. So I do encourage social enterprises to also start looking at the tier 2 and 3 suppliers and buyers, because it's a greater chance of being able to comply with their standards versus the big name corporates who everybody wants to sell into, but often are sorry that they did once they actually start doing so, because they find out how difficult it is to actually comply with all of their standards and shipping requirements, and again the quality standards, etc. So I I again think that it behooves the enterprises to study their models and see how they can do better socially and environmentally. At Agora Partnerships, we do have a particular technology product um, that we will be making public after this year, so any enterprise can use it. This is in the Latin American context, but it is a platform that will allow small businesses to help determine where in their business model they should be making environmental changes that result in an economic gain for them directly, but also an environmentally positive gain. So every single action on that platform that is suggested to the enterprise has that double effect, because we know that small enterprises can't just invest in making their businesses greener or more environmentally friendly without either having external funding or without seeing a direct economic benefit. So we start with what are the actions that you can take today that result in a cost savings. So immediately you're implementing environmentally positive practices that's helping you save money. And then that sort of ladders up to other bigger actions that you can take that could result in new business lines, new products, new kinds of customers, etc. I will also say, and particularly in the Latin American context, green bonds and green funds are becoming much more and more and more and more prevalent or popular. And to be able to access that financing, you do need to be able to prove, um, that you are making positive headway in environmental actions and positive environmental actions. So there's also a world of opportunity that opens up to any social enterprise or small business that is taking the initiative to become more environmentally positive. Again, not just in external financing, but also in new markets. Maria Camila, I think, mentioned as well that just in general, consumers are also demanding more positive products and services. So the more that you can demonstrate that, the better chance you have of tapping into those markets. And the last thing I will say there is, I know that for small enterprises, collecting data around what you are doing is difficult. We know that. And that is what the entrepreneur support organizations are there to help with as well. So if you are, whether it's an Agora Partnerships or whether it's any other one of the hundreds of entrepreneur support organizations in Latin America, if you're not receiving that support on how to collect your data and how to best communicate your data and information to the external world, ask them to help you, because that is something that every entrepreneur support organization should be doing. And again, I'm not saying we do that perfectly either. We have room for improvement as well. And if anybody from my team is listening, note to self there. But it is super important to again communicate these efforts. and know which actions you really need to prioritize in your business model to both help you comply with regulations, but to also help you access new and different kinds of opportunities. Because some actions that you might take might seem good on paper, but they likely won't actually warrant the return, or they won't. How do you say that? They won't generate the return perhaps that you want to see. So I'll stop there, except for saying that we know it's hard. We know it's very, very hard to comply with everything, to maintain informed about everything that's going on in this world, to run your business at the same time as considering, how to make it more positive. It's hard. And I just want to just say that out loud. And no one's expecting anyone to be perfect. But the point is that we all do need to do better. And we need to do better because it makes our business better, but also because it is also just the right thing to do. And I will stop there.
It's the right thing to do, and it is also profitable. If sometimes we don't want to put those two together, right? Being sustainable and being profitable and being market driven. But the truth is that it's an overall opportunity. Just like Maria Camila was saying, it's essential for the business and the growth strategy of Juan Valdez, and it is also a massive challenge for the entrepreneurs in all of these smaller organizations. But overall, the reason why there's a push is because there is a need out there, either because the regulation is pushing it or because the market is demanding it. But the truth is that the market is demanding it more than the regulation has set. I don't know if there are any, because Maria Camila, Ceci, and I agreed that we were going to leave some space at the end for Q&A. Our proposal, if you are to just take 3 insights from this conversation, is that regulations here, it's not going anywhere. Take it as an opportunity. If you are a large organization, embrace it and understand how you can help producers or anyone that's intertwined in your value chain. And there is an acknowledgement from the enablers in the environment for all of these organizations like Agora that it is hard, but it is not going away. And we need to now work even harder to make this happen. Even though there are geopolitical changes that have different views, we all see on a daily basis the social and environmental impact that carries along not being sustainable. And while someone else posts a question, I also wanted to bring in a thought that we're talking now as if sustainability is so new, but the truth is that sustainability is so old. It's just that now it has a different name, right? But we've always had to be sustainable. When 300 years ago they needed to cultivate and harvest, they had to take into account practices that would allow them not to erode the soil and make sure that they could enable an environment. And same when all of the industrial revolutions came along, just making sure that workers had the appropriate conditions brought in more business for these companies. It was more productive. So now we call it sustainability, and I love the word sustainability. And there's an even bigger awareness because our impact as a humankind is bigger, but sustainability is not new. Okay. So
Paola, if you allow me, while we are getting some questions, I would like to highlight something about a very interesting approach that Ceci gave to us related with companies. We acknowledge that corporations we still do have a lot of room for opportunity in terms of how we are supporting small companies or entrepreneurs. But I also want to highlight that, for example, all these wave of regulations could become a real trade for entrepreneurs is if we don't, as corporations, commit to catalyze them and make sure that they can actually access to the markets through our companies and platforms. For example, we do have in Juan Valdez a special policy for entrepreneurs where we can allow them or provide them with different conditions for accessing to our business, because otherwise, as Cecilia said, there are like really high bars that are very difficult for them to reach. But we have been acknowledging that, and that's what we have set some differential conditions for these entrepreneurs and small producers in order to allowing them to access to our market and be part of it. And I think that sort of initiatives are very important because we definitely need to acknowledge that we are not in a equal field. That definitely a corporation like us, it has a completely different condition like a small company. But we also, as a company, acknowledge how powerful and how innovative a small supplier can be, and how much value can bring to our business by innovation, by artisanal work, by different like attributes that we are not able to find in any other kind of suppliers, but these kind of small suppliers. And I think that in this way, when we start to see how strategic can be, how powerful can be in order to access to new markets, to global markets, is when we create these scenarios to allow these small companies to compete. Also, I believe that all these legal, financial, technical, and human resources that we pose as a company are definitely very important to connect with these capacities from the small producers or small entrepreneurs in order to make them more competitive for these scenarios of very regulated scenarios, or even just for the markets that are requiring even more, every time, even more sustainable products. And also, I believe that this conception of just transition that we have been seeing much more common in the climate change sphere is very important to bring out also to these new scenarios of human rights, of transparency in the supply chain, because definitely by allowing them to understand, when I'm talking about allowing them, I'm talking about the suppliers, allowing them to understand and respond to these social and environmental issues that the global north especially is setting and is requiring. They can start to change their operations and the value chain as well. Their value chain that maybe until now they haven't recognized how important it is for them to understand also where are they taking from in terms of materials and inputs, and well, their own suppliers as well. Otherwise, we are gonna face a very unjust scenario, a very unfair one, where these small entrepreneurs are gonna be left out. And I believe that that's why companies play such a huge role. As I said before, for me, multi-stakeholder partnerships are the only way of approaching to this, because we are not going to do it by ourselves neither. We definitely need companies like CESI's approach, like these kind of initiatives that are really more like community-based, or also like governmental initiatives that are supporting this kind of projects. But definitely, I believe that by joining these forces it's the only way of actually moving forward into these agendas. And also, and my last point is about how we advocate for them as well. It's not just advocating for ourselves, but also advocating for them, because we have a different voice. We as corporations have totally different voice. We need to advocate for these communities. We could see this, for example, with EUDR. I don't know, guys, if you know, but this is the regulation that goes like that by 2025, December 2025, 31st December 2025, we are going to be required from 5 value chain, including coffee, to access to the European market with some traceability of no deforestation at all, and social and labor conditions, minimum social and labor conditions with our products. And this is something that sounds amazing, sounds really inspiring. But when you go to the field, when you see small coffee producers, not just in Colombia, but around the globe, you find out that this is something very, very difficult for them to accomplish. What we have been doing, and that's what I'm bringing out this example to the this example to the conversation, is that we acknowledged that, and we understood that there was no way that we could pass on that responsibility to them, because they were barely struggling, to survive their own businesses. So what we did was that we have been actually we are still in the process, but we have been creating a platform with the National Federation of Coffee Growers and our own business, where we can trace and identify all these requirements, and by identifying geo-identification of our farms, like the farms of our suppliers, we can create this model with a lot of technology, with a lot of innovation, for making traceable our value chain, and also for making sure that with some certificates like 4C and so on, we can accomplish these requirements. But we are not passing on that to the coffee producers. We are making sure that we are building the model, and we are paying for it, and we are making sure that they are gonna improve with our support. We are gonna take them into the next level, but we are not saying, okay, this is your task and just do it, and otherwise we are gonna buy to others. That, and I think that's something that I want to close up with this reflection, because otherwise it's gonna be a shame that we don't recognize how important it is for corporations to take full responsibility of these processes, and understanding that we are a platform in order to make them competitive.
Can I say something really quickly there too? And I do, Juan Valdez is a pioneer and a leader in this space. So if there are other corporations on this call, we should definitely check out what they're doing in greater detail. And like Maria Camila said, the reality is that a lot of corporations also won't pay for that. It does in fact take money, and it does in fact take a coalition effort most of the time. So also the invitation is to form those coalitions, because there are lots of nonprofit organizations, lots of government entity, lots of entrepreneur support organizations in every single market. And they are there to support. They're there to actually do this work alongside the enterprises and the small businesses. So it's just a general invitation. I know we only have 2 minutes left, but there is a question in the chat about small businesses in Latin America turning regulatory challenges into competitive advantages. I think I mostly touched on that when I was speaking, but I would again say, just to summarize it, talk about what you're doing, utilize your own data to tell your buyers how you can help them comply with regulations that are coming through. That will make you a more attractive provider for them. And that just talking about it as much as you possibly can with data. And data is super, super key here. Also sharing it with local governments, sharing it with whoever you can, also publicly. Super, super important. And again, accessing at eventually, once you get to that point, green financing, green bonds, green funds. Paola, did you want to say something to wrap?
Oh, you answered it. Yeah, well, just like Cecilia said, ultimately, the buyer is not going to go away. And if you make an effort to be able to comply and to show them that you can comply with the standard, then that will become a competitive advantage for you, instead of that being a competitive advantage for someone else. So sustainability regulations are here to stay. And there is an effort that should be done by major corporations and small entrepreneurs and enabling organizations in order to make sure that this becomes an opportunity for Latin America, as it is already showing it is, rather than to hinder the path towards sustainable development. Have an amazing, amazing day. We're out of time. Bye.
We are SPP, the Sustainable Procurement Pledge.
Global community committed to a single grand goal.
To make sustainable procurement the default.
We think multi-generationally.
We make decisions that guide trillions of dollars.
We believe that sustainable sourcing practices are the fastest way for us to save the world.
This is a call to the unsung heroes.
You, the procurement professionals,
And your allies.
united we are changing tomorrow. For people and planet.
Together, we procure the future.
Sign the pledge.
Activate your power.
Join a community that gets it done.
Procure tomorrow.